All right, for my individual study video, I'm doing the Compromise of 1850 and how it pushed the country closer to a civil war. So, to start with some context, at the time, slavery is a growing political issue, but the only way that politicians were dealing with it, trying to solve the issue, was with previous compromises, most famously the Missouri Compromise, which allowed Missouri to come in as a slave state and Maine as a free state. But what it also did is create this green line here on the map. And what this line meant is that any future state that comes in north of the line will be a free state, and everything south of the line will be a slave state. But this leads to issues with things such as the Mexican American War, where the U.S. wins it and gains this sort of Utah, New Mexico territory. And when these territories gain the population to become a state, um, there's all this tension over how are we going to solve this issue because one's above the line, one's below the line, and the South's arguing that both of them should be slave, North's arguing both should be free. So it's just all this tension between the two sides. And another piece of context is California. Now, with the gold rush of the 40s, the population of California is booming because everyone's flooding in, hoping to strike gold and become rich. So, with this, it meets the population quota to become a state very quickly. But this is an issue because with the Missouri Compromise, um, you see this line here, the white line on the map. California is not split evenly by it. It's half in the north, half in the south. So the issue needs to be addressed of what do we do with California because it's ready to be a state, but it will be free or slave. So what you get is a compromise of 1850. And what it does is it addresses that California issue. California is allowed to come in as a free state, but obviously the South won't just give this to the North. They need something in return, and what they get is popular sovereignty granted to New Mexico and Utah. And what that means is that the territories, when they become states, instead of following that Missouri Compromise line, they will get to choose for themselves if they will become a free or a slave state. The next two are relatively unimportant. They're kind of just add-ons, tying up loose ends of the compromise. And one of those things is slave sale in DC is abolished. Not a big deal because slavery itself isn't abolished, just the sale of slaves. Another thing is that Texas gives up his claims to New Mexico. Again, not a huge deal. But the big thing is the Fugitive Slave Act. This is the big ticket item that the South gets. And what it means is that it forces Northerners to help in the recapture of runaway slaves. As you can see here in this doc, the slave leaves the slave state, thinks he's free, his chains are broken, and then the free state's right there to put the chains back on him. So that's kind of what the Fugitive Slave Act um, forces to happen. But what happens is that the South didn't predict the Northern response to this to be so powerful. Northerners try to protest this in any way they can. They're very against this law because it sort of forces them to abandon their previously abolitionist views, and it forces them to, by law, basically contribute to slavery by helping recapture runaway slaves. An example of the Northern response is the case of Anthony Burns. He was born into slavery and ran away. Um, he ran away actually to the city of Boston, but he was caught because with the Fugitive Slave Act, you have all these slave catchers basically running around northern states unchecked. And what you see in this doc here to the right is that um, Northerners kind of respond to this. This is a flyer found in the North advocating for Northerners to show up to this meeting at Faneuil Hall to discuss solutions to how they can help this man, Anthony Burns. A man is kidnapped. We need to do something. So that's kind of what happens here. And the result is they decide that they need to do something. So they try to like break him out of where he's being held. Um, and they ultimately fail in their attempt. But after he's been sent back to the plantation, a black church raises enough money to buy his freedom. So in the end, he gets to become a free man, and that's that that shows the northern response to. It shows how they're strengthened in this anti-slavery. We need to stop this because um, the people who had been fence sitting in the north, they're kind of forced to get shoved off the fence because slavery is now in their backyard. Slave catchers are running around their neighborhood trying to find runaway slaves, and it's disrupting their way of life, their way of freedom, and they're kind of forced into this anti-slavery movement, and so that leads to the growing divide between the North and the South. And to finish off, I have another cartoon here, and it sort of sums up everything that's going on. The Compromise of 1850. Uh, Slaves freed north of this line with an X over it, showing how the Fugitive Slave Act, runaway slaves are never really free because the slave catchers can just go take them and all that. And all these territories in the West, when they become states, how do we address that issue of free or slave? It's just compromise over compromise over compromise. And here you have Henry Clay, who is the person who kind of orchestrated the Missouri Compromise. He orchestrated the Compromise of 1850, kind of did all that, and he's slumped over. He knows that you can't keep a country together when no one's ever really satisfied. They're just kind of okay, And he's like, this is no country to be in. He can't keep doing this forever. And so this kind of sums up how the Compromise of 1850 just pushed us closer to a civil war. So yeah, in conclusion, the Compromise of 1850, even though it was made to try to uh, lower and de-escalate the tensions, it really increased the tensions between the North and the South, and really pushed us as a nation closer to the Civil War.